Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Nell Irvin Painter. She's a professor of American history at Princeton University, Emerita. Thank you very much for being with us
I'm
today.
delighted to be with you. Thank you.
Nearly a decade ago, you wrote a book titled The History of White People. At that time, Barack Obama was the first black president. Donald Trump was still a real estate mogul, TV star. And the ideology of white supremacism had not yet prompted individuals to commit mass murders, like we saw in Norway back in 2011.
This round, yes.
And a few days ago in Christchurch, New Zealand. So obviously, your book, which is now published in French, is literally a history of white people. Why did you feel the need to do this back in 2010?
Okay, so we're in two very different times.
Yes.
I started my book in 2000 when the Russians were bombing Grozny in the Caucasus. And I'm sitting at home in New Jersey thinking, why are white Americans called Chechens, Chechnya? It didn't make any sense. Why do we call white Americans Caucasians? So that was the beginning of the book. It's an intellectual history of constructions of American whiteness by scholars. It's not about what white people have done to other people. It's about constructions of American
About
whiteness.
ideology, essentially.
Exactly. So at that time, there wasn't a need to put together white nationalism with constructions of white ideology, identity. That has changed in the decade. And now with Trump and with white nationalist terrorism, it's very clear that there's a relationship between ordinary, everyday American whiteness and Trump and terrorism. So there's several steps, but they're related in a way that was not obvious in the first part of this century.
Right. Obviously, as you said, Trump has since been elected on the promise to make America great again.
Yes.
And there is the feeling by some that actually he meant make America white again.
It was pretty clear at the time because of all the various commentary around that construction. Many of us heard Make America White Again, and that was part of his attraction. Let's go back to the 1950s.
Right. I mean, have you seen evidence of this since his election? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about his reaction to the Charleston events, for instance.
Yes. When he said there were very fine people there. Yes. So he's gone very easy on white nationalists. David Duke, for instance, who was a leading Nazi and Klansman in the American South, was one of his supporters, and he did not want to say anything against him. So he's gone very easy on white nationalists while coming down very hard on anybody who stood up for black people or against the terrorism that is leveled at black Americans. So his approach to different kinds of injustice and violence has been very different.
Do you think that by doing this, maybe it's just pure politics, he's allowed this ideology to enter the mainstream?
Exactly.
And the White House, maybe?
Yes. Yes, and I think that's a very good way to put it, to allow what had been fringe, which had been different from ordinary, everyday American whiteness. Ordinary, everyday American whiteness says that white Americans don't have race. They are individuals. But with Trump bringing in this white nationalist theme, it forces many American white people who are not racist or, personally racist, to declare their position vis-a-vis what it means to be white in the United States.
Right. Obviously, Trump probably wouldn't have been elected maybe if Barack Obama hadn't been elected before.
Absolutely.
Some people are blaming, maybe the word is too harsh, Obama for not addressing the race issue
Obama
more?
could not.
He couldn't.
could not.
Because he was black.
Because he was black. If he had come down any harder on racial issues, there would have been a whole hue and cry against him as being too much for black people. He was the president of all the Americans, including Trump's people.
Right. I guess what's really interesting, at least for you, is that in the case of Breivik back in Norway,
Yes.
or Tarrant, the alleged perpetrator of the attacks
Yes.
in Christchurch,
Yes.
they gave a whole ideological justification. They
Yes.
come out with
At
memos,
great length, manifestos.
manifestos,
Yes.
essentially saying that they were there to protect the white people, the white race.
Yes.
What's your reaction to this? Because saying it is one thing, saying it and acting on it
Are two
against
different things.
liberals in the case of Norway or Muslims in the case of New Zealand is
Yes.
clearly another step.
Yes. We could talk for a very long time about this body of ideology that has many strands, including anti-black, anti-Semitism, anti-intellectual, and so forth. I want to separate acting on terrorism from the ideology of replacement, which invented here in France.
By Renaud Camus.
Yeah, but which also has longer antecedents in the early 20th century with an anxiety about birth rates and about falling birth rates and about the right kind of white people not having enough children and the wrong kind of white people or other non-white people having too many children. It's very old, and it goes into eugenics. Eugenics is basically around the right people having enough children. And eugenics went into Nazism. And the Nazis taking eugenical principles of suppressing the wrong people, they took that to murderous ends, scared the dickens out of American eugenicists who kind of decided, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to go down that road. So what the Nazis did with American ideas about replacement and anxiety over birth rates changed for the better how Americans were thinking about racial difference once they could see what it led to.
Right. I mean, what's interesting in the case, the tragic case of Brenton Tarrant, he actually penned this memo, 74 pages, and he called it the Great Replacement,
Yes.
which is essentially a theory by the French writer Renaud Camus, whereby Muslims would essentially replace pure French people.
Yeah.
And he says, just that he's obsessed with the so-called white genocide.
Yeah.
He makes a reference a couple of times to a well-known American neo-Nazi, David Lane, who coined the so-called 14 words slogan,
Yeah.
"We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children."
What's really interesting is that the terrorism, the white national terrorism, is for white people, but the people it's against, especially in terms of New Zealand, are people united by a religion. Right. Religion used to be the terms of terrorism in Europe before race took hold during the Enlightenment. So this is a kind of both a return to old ideas about religious strife, which we know have created wars aplenty in Europe, but also the question of killing for your people.
Right. To go back as a conclusion to the U.S., are you really concerned about race relations? Obviously, you repeat it in the book. All the studies, scientific studies, show that there's no scientific basis for race, but
Yes.
nevertheless,
Yes.
the public discourse is
Yeah.
out there. There are
Yes.
races,
Yeah.
and they don't like each other
There
necessarily.
are two things going on. One is that race is an idea, it's an ideology. Within that ideology is that it is biological and it's permanent and it's in the person. That is the ideology, which is an idea, it's not a fact. What is a social fact is the fact of racial terrorism, the fact of racial discrimination. Those are social facts that have real meaning in people's lives when they can't get jobs or they get paid less or they can't rent or buy homes. So they're two different things. Race is one thing, is an ideology. Racism is another thing, a material part of people's lives.
But are you concerned that race relations could worsen?
They always worsen. That's how they are. I mean,
Didn't they improve under Obama slightly? No,
it
you wouldn't
depends on
say
what
so.
you look at.
Right.
Many people feel, and I mean, I felt better that we had an attractive, intelligent, serious person as our president, which I'm not sure was the case before, and it's clearly not the case after Obama. It was marvelous to have Obama as president. Can we have another Obama? I don't know.
We'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
There's going to be obviously a big campaign.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Neil Irvin Painter,
My
for
pleasure.
coming on the France 24 set. And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview.
Okay.
Your needs are changing, and so is France24.com. With articles, reports, the latest international news, all our programmes available on replay, together with live broadcasting 24/7. Intuitive, fast, and available in 4 languages. France24.com. Liberté, égalité, actualité.